Late last year, the Courier Mail newspaper ran an interview with a man it dubbed the Insider, the same Labor Party apparatchik to whom Sunday has now also spoken. He detailed yet another scam run here in 1987 on Bribie Island. How street address lists generated by the party off the electoral roll were used to identify which voters had moved out of the electorate. It's legitimately used to find people who are not enrolled. But once it's known which voters have left the electorate, it's also a simple but criminal matter to vote for them at the next election. And he said that's exactly what happened.
I know it happened. I know the people who did it, and it's opened up a Pandora's box on not just that election, but on other elections here.
The Electoral Commission refused to be interviewed by Sunday, but Professor Colin Hughes was the Federal Electoral Commissioner from 1984 to 1989. He claims that examples of suspected fraud, such as those cited by Terry Geiger, are too isolated to make a difference.
So, for example, Geiger, I just don't believe.
You just don't believe Geiger?
Yeah, I don't believe those numbers. There may well have been 10 or 20 people in Stafford whose enrolments were crook.
I mean, how could you say that unless you checked?
Because the evidence has not been forthcoming even now.
It's a matter of public record that just before the 1989 state election, Terry Geiger objected to nearly 700 names on the Stafford roll. And the Electoral Commission removed all but about 20 of them. Not all of them were as blatant as those Mr Geiger showed us. Many people had just moved on. But Mr Geiger believes not enough was ever done to fully investigate his much broader concerns.
Yeah, I held the most marginal seat in the state for 15 years, and my majorities at times were 40-something votes, 80-something votes I won one by.
So this kind of fraud, if it was occurring, could definitely swing an election.
Oh, it had the definite potential to do it. That gave me a fairly heavy incentive to make sure the roll was clean.
Even this former electoral commissioner thinks it's time to check the integrity of the roll by doing something never done before, picking one or a few key electorates and requiring every voter to re-enroll.
I think it's a good idea. It would cost only a few $100,000, and it would be an acid test of what's happened.
This week it seems likely the government will ignore objections from the Labor states and opposition and press ahead with attempts to require new voters to show identification before they can enrol to vote at the next federal election. Labor fears any such move would especially stop some of its traditional supporters from voting.
Some people would be seriously affected. Young people.
Why?
Aboriginal people. People in rural and remote communities.
Why?
Because a lot of these people actually don't carry ID like you or I.
Well, I find that an amazing argument. Does that mean that they believe that the people who are illegitimately enrolling are Labor voters and therefore they should be allowed to illegitimately enrol?
The current enrolment processes work. They work well. There are strong sanctions if there's any falsification. And why change it and affect the franchise, the capacity of people to be on the electoral roll and vote in elections?
What do you say to the Electoral Commission when it says that there is not, and there hasn't been for many, many years, decades, evidence of systematic electoral fraud which might have corrupted an election?
I think there's a famous statement from one of the Australian films that said, "You've got to be dreaming." It's there. I proved it numerous times in Stafford. Other members have proved it in other areas. The Electoral Commission seems to have a vested interest in not admitting that the systems are faulty.
Ross Coulthard with that report, the producer Nick Farrow, and we'll be continuing our investigation into electoral rorts in the run-up to this year's federal election. If you have any hard evidence of electoral fraud, you can contact us on this number, 02 9965 2483. All calls will be treated as confidential. You can also contact us via our website at 9msn.com.au/Sunday. Coming up, the real-life producers of the producers.